Welcome to the Engage Group podcast. I'm Paul McClatchie. You can join me and my team for conversations with the brains behind some of Ireland's best companies. We've a particular focus on what we call employability and what others call the employer value proposition. And that's really getting a good understanding of how the best companies attract the best people to their firm, to attract, develop and retain the best talent. So you're very welcome to today's episode, and we're delighted to have attracted Conor McCarthy. Conor is the founder of Emerald Airlines with an extensive background within the aviation airline space. Conor is the chair of Dublin Aerospace and has a very interesting past, which includes built a strong track record based on Aer Lingus, Ryanair and AirAsia, amongst others. So Conor, fantastic for you to have joined us today. Thank you very much.
Hi, Paul. Thank you.
So if we set the scene about what we call sort of employability, and what's your view about what makes a company stand out as an employer within the marketplace?
Yeah, it's a great question, and of course, in today's environment, it's a huge issue for all of us, both employees and employers. I think number one for us always is a sense of integrity. I think it's really important that people are proud to belong to a particular brand or company, and integrity runs through that everywhere. So it's not just a question of what you paint over the door or what slogans you put up on the staff restaurant. It's actually about, do you live your values? Are you clear about your values? And do those values stand up to scrutiny in a modern world? And that's a rapidly shifting line. So you just need to keep on top of that stuff. But, you can get very complicated about it. You can get very involved in it. But at the end of the day, if you're true to yourself and your values, and those values are ones that you're happy to print in the local newspaper, I think those are the type of things that can leave you as an attractive employer and a nice place to work.
Yeah, very good. And one of the reasons why we're particularly keen to chat to you, Conor, and why we're delighted that we're speaking today, I would have noticed just in some of the work we were doing with Emerald Airlines that you've been very proactive on LinkedIn in particular, very proactive in talking about the successes that you've achieved within Emerald, key new people joining the business at time to time, communicating to the market where there's been challenges. Was that a sort of a conscious decision on your side to be as proactive as that, or did that come naturally to you?
I guess initially LinkedIn is a great resource, and the more you engage with it, the more you get out of it. It's like, in a way, we would have seen it as kind of Facebook for grown-ups, and we like the fact that it really does attract. We see it very much as an employer brand platform, where, as you say, employability becomes the issue. You want to let people know what's going on in your business. Aviation, luckily, is still a very attractive business. It's bounced back beyond all expectations after COVID. This year we'll probably see us matching pre-COVID levels of traffic, which is an unbelievable recovery for an industry that was literally forcibly shut down by government actions through the pandemic. And yet it's bounced back. Now we're going through a phase in the industry where we have to rebuild balance sheets, rebuild our position in relation to cash and resilience. But it's an attractive business, so people like to engage. Even if they don't work in the airline industry, they have a tendency to follow it. So LinkedIn is a great opportunity for us there.
Yeah, very good. And tell me, so what, the Emerald Airlines brand and the journey to date, what was it like starting a new airline during a pandemic?
Oh God, yeah, insane, absolutely insane. It's been some roller coaster. So just to give a brief timeline, I suppose. So in and around, obviously February 2020 was when we saw the pandemic really bite, and then the restrictions came in very quickly afterwards. But around that summer, in May 2020, we were told by Aer Lingus that they were going to put up their Aer Lingus regional franchise for grabs, and that franchise was due to expire. The current franchise agreement is due to expire in 2023. So they were advertising it early so they could select a partner and have that partner teed up Of course, the incumbent was also part of the candidates, and we were one of, I think it was 5 different airlines that applied. We were a paper airline at the time, if you like. We were on simply down as a management team with an idea and a business plan. So throughout that summer, we pulled that plan together. September, then we made our application to Aer Lingus, and in November they selected us as their preferred candidate above the other 4. And the following February, we signed a binding MOU. From then on, it was all systems go. We had to get a headquarters, refurbish it, make it fit for purpose, buy in all of the systems, write all the manuals that an airline has to write and organise itself around, negotiate deals on everything from aircraft tooling to parts to the actual aircraft leases themselves, and also get into the business of not just hiring the management team, but hire everybody else that we needed to get the airline going. And by September 21, we received a brand new AOC, Aircraft Operator Certificate, from the Irish Aviation Authority, and we received an operator's license from the CAR, Commission for Aviation Regulation. So that it authorised us essentially to sell tickets to the public and to operate the aircraft types that we had in our manuals. So from then on, we were getting ready for commercial flights, and just under 1 year ago, it'll be a year next week, we took our first commercial flight from Dublin to Donegal. Since then, we've introduced about 2 aircraft, or 1 aircraft every 2 weeks, which is really breakneck speed. When you think about it, you have to hire cabin crew, flight crew, engineers, and all the support staff to go with that. And rolled out the business last summer, the first summer since COVID, really. And it's been just a roller coaster, just trying to keep up with it. But we've been really fortunate, fantastic team of people, a lot of really young people here. And the great thing about employing young people is they don't know what's not possible or what is possible. They just do. And we've had so many people who just do, and they work together so well. So that's been probably the high point of the whole last year, is just watching what a new team of, empowered people can achieve when they work together. And that's been the plus. The minus has been how tired I feel some weeks, and how it's just overwhelming. You're dealing with such a range of issues in the airline business. It's an amazing spectrum. But look, I'm in a happy place now. I think we've achieved a lot.
Yeah, well done, and the 1 year anniversary now is definitely should be celebrated. So congratulations on that.
We will.
Yeah. And just in relation to the vision you had for the organisation, were you sort of sitting there maybe 2018, 2019, you saw vision basically, because the path had been covered. There was Air Aran, obviously Stobart, and there was clearly an opportunity there. What was sort of your gut feel in relation to what was going to make this work at the time, Conor, and maybe what have been the key successes, learning experiences along the way? What sort of been the key pieces so far?
Yeah, I've a long time in the business under my belt, and actually at one stage in my career, I was the chief executive of Aer Lingus Commuter, which is largely the precursor of Aer Lingus Regional. We flew to the same cities. We had a very extensive domestic network in Ireland at the time, which has largely been overhauled by the motorway network that we've built in the last 30 years. But notwithstanding that, the cross-channel routes we operate are largely those routes that we used to operate as Aer Lingus Commuter. So that was one job I had years ago within the mothership of Aer Lingus, that always attracted me back to running my own airline. I suppose the second thing is, for the last 23 years, when I left Ryanair, I set up Plane Consult, which was a business that largely advised people who were setting up their own airlines or restructuring an airline. And we specialized in the low cost space, the low cost carriers. And that's where we got to set up airlines like AirAsia and Jetstar in Australia and Viva Aerobus in Mexico, etc. So as an advisor or consultant, we're sometimes accused of borrowing someone's watch to tell them the time. So that was something I wanted to do, was to set up my own airline and to follow my own advice. So where we thought there was a big advantage was in, first of all, aligning with a great brand like Aer Lingus. Secondly, was getting into a route network such as the Aer Lingus regional route network, which can feed Aer Lingus's hub at Dublin, can also expand into other cities on the island, such as Belfast, where we're now the largest carrier in Belfast City. And to basically use the learnings of the low cost model, i.e. keep it simple, try and use one aircraft type, try and use a uniform approach to everything. And we've done that in Emerald. So we've used a lot of the lessons that the low cost industry has taught the airline business, but we're using it in the regional space. And that's why all our aircraft are 72 seaters. They all have 2 cabin crew. They all have the same engines, the same avionics. So we're basically, when anyone talks about a plane in the building here, we know we're talking about an ATR 72. And it's the only specialism that our engineers have or are required to have. They have plenty of specialisms, but it's the aircraft we focus on. And that was the vision, really, to use that, to combine it with a great brand like Aer Lingus. We also have an alliance with British Airways where their code is on all our flights. So we've got distribution and brand awareness through those giants. And yet we have a very agile, small airline, which it does things sensibly and simply here in Dublin.
Yeah, very good. And my understanding with the turboprops is they're am I right in saying they're more environmentally friendly as well?
Yeah, they have a fantastic carbon footprint. If you compare them to an equivalent jet of their size, they burn about half the fuel. They will burn about 1/3 of the fuel of a 737. And when you think about that, on top of that, we have it's got really good credentials in terms of how light it is. But also, if you take an example, people often, try to compare airline travel with road travel. So if you take our route to Donegal, which is about a 4.5-hour drive, you fly that route on an ATR 72. The ATR 72 burns about 2.5 litres per seat for every 100 kilometres it travels. If you take an average, family saloon diesel car, you're probably looking at something that's burning over twice that amount, 6 to 7 litres per 100 kilometres. So not only are you able to travel all the way from Donegal to Dublin in about 40 minutes by air, but you're burning less than half the carbon. Because most journeys, let's face it, are one person in a car on their own. There's not, the average journey is probably 1.3 people. So we've much lower carbon footprint, and you don't use all of the huge carbon footprint that's there in building roads and bridges. So there are cases where regional flying is much more environmentally friendly than driving.
Yeah, very good. And is that the sort of the medium long-term plan then to work sort of exclusively with Aer Lingus with turboprops, or would you see yourselves becoming involved maybe with other airlines down the line, or it maybe depends on where the demand is?
Yeah, it's a good question. I suppose there's where we are at the moment. This summer we will have 17 aircraft in service, all ATR 72s, all in Aer Lingus colours, and we'll be the exclusive operator of Aer Lingus regional franchise. We do work within the IAG group, so you have other brands there such as Iberia and British Airways and Vueling. So whether or not we expand our offering or work for some of those other carriers remains to be seen. At the moment, we're really busy just in our second year of operations now. of having a really good year. Last summer, with the condition of the airports and with the employment market the way it was, there was a huge, gap between customer expectations and the actual delivery. So flights were delayed, bags were being lost, etc. And we got caught up in some of that as well, because a lot of our traffic is transitioning from major hubs. So this year, I think we're just focused on operational excellence. Yeah. We have our own ground handling unit now in Dublin. We have our own Emerald catering unit. So we couldn't even get catering on our aircraft last summer because nobody could supply us. They just didn't have the staff. Yeah. Whereas we've just in the last 4 weeks introduced our own onboard sales, and we'll be able to introduce duty free now in the next few weeks. So that all helps the customer experience and helps our bottom line.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. So if we were looking at maybe the branding side of things, and so I on a sort of a daily basis speak to founders, managing directors, CEOs of businesses, and more often than not, there's a conversation about how significantly the sort of the employer-employee dynamic has changed over the last 5 or 10 years. In the past, basically, if someone you had plenty of choice when it came to hiring, and if someone got a job, they were lucky to get a job, and that's sort of how it worked. Whereas there can be sort of a little bit of the opposite, and we try and coach people, when they're seeking an individual, when they're seeking a role, to have a sort of a healthy outlook. But there is an element of what can this company do for me, from an employee perspective. What's your view? I mean, you've worked with some really strong brands over the years globally, Conor, and anything that you've sort of learned about branding and attracting talent, maybe pre-Emerald, that really stuck with you sort of along the way, or sort of inspired you in terms of some of the choices you made for Emerald?
It's a few things. Well, the first thing is we're largely an employer in the Irish market, and I've worked in so many countries over the last 25 years, that the one thing I would say is the average Irish employee is an amazing resource to get hold of. And no matter where I've gone in the world, if I come across Irish engineers, Irish pilots, Irish cabin crew, you just know you're onto a good thing, because there's such a good work ethic here in Ireland, and it's a really great market to hire the best talent. So we're very fortunate there. So I would not worry about where I'm starting from. The second thing I think I've learned over the years is, you can be an employer of choice. It doesn't mean that you have to be, particularly, what would I say, worshipping of the employee and the employee's experience. Employees are more reasonable than that. They actually, what they want is a place that challenges them, a role that challenges them, empowerment. That is really empowerment. In other words, you give them a job to do, you give them some pretty clear guidance, you train them well, and then you measure them. And people like to be measured. And I don't mean this in a kind of a hamster wheel way. I mean, people like to get feedback. They like to know that they're doing a good job, and they like to hear it. Yes, if you're going to have to, offer some criticism, make sure you do it in a productive, constructive way. So when you engage with people and you think that there's aspects of the job they've done that could be improved upon, well, just make sure you have at least a 3-to-1 ratio, because people don't take criticism very well. None of us do. And so you have to make sure it's seen in a constructive light. It's about coaching, if you like, as opposed to criticism. And I think there are two things I learned. Make sure you ask enough of your people. I see people who leave jobs because they feel underutilized. So a classic example is in Dublin Aerospace, we have a very challenging apprenticeship with very high hurdle rates in terms of, whether you qualify, because you're working on aircraft. There's no room for error. So we demand a high standard, and we generally get that, which is great. During the pandemic, a lot of people moved to other industries. And those other industries would be extremely competitive in terms of wages, in terms of conditions, in terms of the little trinkets they add in, the frills. And yet we've had a huge number of those people returning to aviation, because in aviation, it's a very demanding and it is not a forgiving trade in that you have to be right, you have to be sure, and it demands the best people. And a lot of those people who left us to go to other industries felt that they were actually losing those skills in other industries.
Yeah.
And so we've been delighted to see we had the Great Resignation. I think we're seeing the great return in aviation because it's in people's blood. It's been in my blood for 45 years. I left school at 16, became an apprentice and never looked back. And I see a lot of people who are joining the industry straight from school, and that it's one of the few industries that still enables you to rise to the very top without having had to go to college, without having to go to, to third level or even fourth level. And I think that's a good thing. And I'm a big fan of that, of traineeships and apprenticeships, learning on the job.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things you touched upon there about, what we call sort of the motivation for leaving, and it would be quite common. We'd be speaking to a company's hiring, and they'd be looking at a CV and a track record. They're always interested to hear as to why someone has made a move. It's a fairly common theme, and you could be forgiven for thinking that people just move for financial reasons. There's always an element to that. I think people are looking for a power or a slight nudge up, but it's very often challenge. It's really looking to take that next step up. It's keeping that sort of career momentum. When you lose career momentum, it takes a lot of drive and energy to get back on track, basically, and to get into organizations who are going to challenge and, as you say, basically ask you to fulfill your potential. But money's sort of aside to that, to be honest with you. And I would say the other piece is then the relationship with their boss is obviously a key piece. It's not something that people always speak up about, at interviews. I mean, tell me, so you're obviously. You mentioned the job in aerospace there, which you're obviously the chair at the moment. I know you've lots of other sort of board roles. What do you look for, Conor, from your leaders? If you were picking out sort of 2 or 3 key traits, so you've talked a little bit about, that level of commitment and the clarity piece you like to sort of instill. What are the traits you look for from people?
Yeah, and just to go back on that, I think there's a great saying doing the rounds, which is that people don't leave companies, they leave managers. So, if you've got good managers, even in the worst companies, good managers can hold on to great people. Yeah. And some of the best companies, bad managers can force good people to leave unnecessarily. Yeah. So you really do have to manage your managers, and you have to also give them challenges and give them development opportunities so that they feel they're improving in their potential. And the fact that they got to a management position alone means that they have a career aspiration, that it is important to them. So what we'd look for, I think that integrity word comes through again. Integrity, because it encompasses a huge amount, honesty, an ability to communicate clearly, and also as people will be watching that manager, do they live up to those values? Are they true to the values that they espouse? So, that old saying, do what I say, not what I do. Well, if that's the case, you're in trouble. If you've someone who spouts about, working hard or something, and then they spend most of their time drinking coffee and having chats, and that you're wondering, well, there's not much of a work ethic there. So I think that's the most important one. Communications is key, but also empathy. A need to empathize with people in their role and say, what does this person expect of the job? They're doing a good job where they are, okay, but they obviously want what are their wants and needs, and do they feel like the communication is working both ways? Can they tell you why they're unhappy with something, or can they communicate about what they would like to see the business move towards? And it's to create that open environment where people feel let's say fearless about it, or they don't feel intimidated, that they can express their views without being pigeonholed as a complainer or a whiner, or as a malcontent. And it's to encourage that. And also you look across your employee group and you see the team. There's some people who are quite outspoken. There's some people who are quiet. With the quiet people, you have to watch the body language. You have to watch what it is they nod to, what it is they say. They may say very little, but when they do speak, it's very important to listen. Because there's some people will always speak up
Yeah.
and let you know where they stand, but there's other people who, if they were to say something, you almost has to listen twice as well.
Yeah. And in terms of building the culture, over the last year, and it sounds like it's been hard work, but as you said, very rewarding. In terms of sort of intentionally, getting people together, because everyone was from a different background, different companies. I'm sure, some different nationalities in there, different ways of working. How did you unify it? How did you build the vision together? I know, obviously, so we've mentioned about LinkedIn, maybe to the outside world. I'm sure that was useful for, your sort of existing employees. But what other sort of tools did you use? Was it cups of coffee? Was it get together on a Friday morning? What sort of has worked well for you?
Yeah, we were so busy getting the day job done. And, in one case, we almost forgot to celebrate our inaugural flight. We were so busy organising everything. The inaugural flight was just another day when we flew to Donegal. It was only 3 weeks beforehand that we said, "Oh my God, hang on, we've got this first commercial flight coming up. We have to make a celebration of it." And it was a friend of mine who said to me, "So what are we doing for the inaugural? Where are we going?" And so we pulled a celebration together there at fairly short notice. And that probably is the hallmark of a lot of the things we've done at short notice. We have a weekly management get together on a Monday, and we try to single out items to celebrate. We have an above and beyond award system within the staff group, and that's where members of the team can endorse another member of the team for something that they've done that's above and beyond the call of duty. And it could be just somebody who's a pleasure to work with every day, who comes to work with a smile, and who makes everyone's day a better day, even when operations are difficult. Or it could be somebody who just went beyond the call of duty to help a customer. And we've had so many cases of that where, we would maybe have a number of elderly customers where cabin crew have gone and literally ensured that they got to their bus and got the bus to, the town they were going to that night, and way beyond what was expected, and probably delayed their own getting home by over an hour. And you see that care, and you try to recognise it and put it under lights so that everybody can realise this is a nice thing to do. So we would basically try to celebrate small celebrations like that. When we have an event coming up, like next week is our first anniversary of our first commercial flight, we'll do something both Dublin and Belfast, and we'll have a little celebration, maybe a couple of prizes for staff, just to highlight the award or the event. Things like that. Nothing too dramatic. We've had a couple of staff nights out, Christmas parties, that sort of thing. But again, it's just to give people the opportunity to meet outside of the working environment. And actually that does help a lot, particularly, where people are in a hard charging atmosphere. The chance to go out and relax over a drink and, just simply have a relaxed night outside of work is actually a very good thing. It just helps people unwind a little bit, get to know people they wouldn't otherwise have known in the business, and chat to them, and come in the following week, say, so-and-so, they're really interesting. I hadn't had a chance to chat to them before,
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, the aviation space in Ireland, it's a big sector, and a lot of us, if we did any sort of business related qualification in college, when you did strategy, it was Southwest Airlines. A lot of us would remember it. And then while we were probably reading that, then Ryanair itself was obviously getting up and running, and like them or loathe them. I know you obviously had worked with Ryanair for a period of time, but it's a significant international business. It's sort of globally known. As an organisation, I know Dublin Airport is a significant European airport, in terms of the numbers of people who pass through. And I think a lot of us, maybe the fact that we're an island, a lot of us travel, people travel frequently. I know during COVID, basically a lot of people felt, a little bit restricted on that front. Just from an employer perspective, what would you say to maybe someone who is in a functional role, maybe be it sort of finance, it could be HR, marketing, tech. What sort of kept you in the sector, Conor? I mean, clearly you're very passionate about the aviation space, the airline space. What's kept you sort of interested in that area?
Um, I suppose the one thing is it's such a challenging sector to be in. Like you could be in a lot of other industries, and if you get 2 out of 3 things right, you're gonna do okay. And if you get 3 out of 3 things right, you're going to be super profitable. In the airline industry, you have to get 7 out of 7 things right just to survive. So it sounds like a bit of masochism, really, that we beat ourselves up a lot. But it's such a challenging industry. It's almost intoxicating that you're constantly trying to fine tune, but at the same time trying to keep it simple. And the costs of failure are huge, and the rewards of success are relatively modest. So, you're on a tipping point all the time of getting it right. But you can't afford to get it wrong. So you can pass a certain thing, but if you fail on something, it becomes very obvious very quickly. So you've got to get everything right, and I suppose that's the challenge. And the more I'm in the industry, the more that challenge exists, because there is no single formula for getting it right. You've got to work at it every day. So you mentioned Ryanair, like a really impressive business, really well run, super disciplined management team, and absolutely, tremendous competitor to have in our market. So we have to know where we stand in relation to things like customer service, our friendliness, our price point, our unit costs, because if we don't get our positioning right, we'll be punished very, very heavily by the likes of Ryanair in our markets. So it's good from that point of view. It keeps us on our toes. And it enables us to really focus on what it is we're going to be good at, because otherwise we're just going to get steamrollered. So I guess that's the challenge, and that keeps us at it. It's, if it was too easy, we might get a bit bored at it, and we might not really engage for as much. So you have to have that challenge to push you.
Yeah. Well, no fear of being too easy, but the sounds of things with the 7 out of 7. Just a final few questions, Conor. It'd be really interesting to hear about your views on some of the pieces we've discussed so far. If we look maybe a little bit more at the employee mindset, and we like to give people the best chance of success, when they're pursuing a new challenge and so forth. It's really up there with the most important decisions that an individual can make, from a career perspective, and their own sort of happiness, fulfillment. If you were looking back to your own career, and what sort of advice, or was there a turning point for you, from whether it be from a leadership perspective or a career decision that you made that, for good or bad, made all the difference? And maybe what would you say to the Conor of 10, 15, 20 years ago, in terms of the key piece that you picked up that have been most benefit that you might be able to pass on?
Okay, well, I suppose the first might be in your early career, like you work, you believe you're working very hard, and most people actually do work hard, not because you have to, but because you want to, and that's usually an inner drive, as opposed to looking outside of yourself. It's where you want to get your qualifications, where you want to be the best at what you do. And then you're hoping that somebody notices and maybe gives you your first promotion. What I'd say to people who are in that role is, even though you might have been doing that job really well and you're waiting for that opportunity to knock on your door, they don't always arrive when you think they should. In fact, most of the time they don't. So you can go through a year, 2 or 3 years of relative frustration, where you're thinking, God, I'm working so hard at this, and I'm producing the results that were asked, and people have said you're doing really well, but I'm not seeing any extra promotions come my way, or money come my way. I would say to people not to let that frustration get into them, because you can't know, or you can't particularly drive when an opportunity might present itself. So that'd be the first thing, that don't get frustrated. If you're doing a good job well, there is a lot of satisfaction to be gained in that. And challenge yourself to do it better. Challenge yourself to, figure out, is there something else? Is there a different approach? We see it with professional golfers who are playing off scratch, and yet they go away and completely relearn their putting or their drive. And I'm not a golfer, so but I can imagine how difficult is that for someone who's got to being a scratch golfer to go away and completely relearn a core part of their game. So, sporting analogies work very well in business. And I would say, don't be afraid to say, this job I've been doing all the time, is there a different way I could do it? Could I revolutionize it? And sometimes that can really bring great results. Second thing I would say is opportunities, when they do come, may not come at a time that suits you. But I would actually be saying, look at the opportunity and say, okay, so for example, I was working with Qantas in Australia in 2009, and I was commuting out and back to Australia. The family were still here when SR Technics decided to close their hangars here in Dublin. And that was where I originally started with Aer Lingus as an apprentice. So the opportunity arose for somebody to buy the tools and assets of SR Technics here in Dublin. I was very busy. I was traveling to Mexico, traveling to Australia, traveling to Malaysia. I was earning plenty of money. It was managing the time in my life. That was the big challenge for me. Time with the family, time at the business, not biting off too much. And yet, this opportunity came up, and it was at the back of or just at the start, I guess, of our terrible recession in 2008-9, where the property prices collapsed and the domestic market collapsed. So I felt at the time, God, they're going to close that place down. And actually, even though the timing wasn't right, I decided to grab the opportunity to set up Dublin Aerospace. And as well as that, I decided not to try and buy the business as a going concern, because it had already been tried 4 times and had failed 4 times. So why would I buy it as a going concern only to try and do the same again? Because the people that went before me weren't stupid. They knew what they needed to do. They just couldn't get it done. So we allowed, we bought the business and the tools of the business, and we took leases on the hangars, and we started with 18 people in 2009. And today, Dublin Aerospace Group has almost 500 people. But that was an opportunity that really, it came at a time when it didn't suit me. But at the same time, I knew that it might not come again. And I would also have huge regrets had this business that gave me my start in aviation collapsed and never restarted, because to gain the approvals and the skills that were there at the time SRT closed would be almost impossible without taking it on fairly fresh. So I had to make a decision to go and do it. And similarly with Emerald Airlines, when Aer Lingus put up its franchise, there wasn't going to be another opportunity for another 10 years. And, I'm 61 this month. So, I definitely wouldn't have been around to do it in 10 years' time. Or, well, I might be pushing a Zimmer frame or something, but I don't think I'd be starting an airline. So the opportunity doesn't always come when it suits you, but you should be ready to take it and take the risk. And that would be my final point. Never be afraid to go out on your own. I had worked with Aer Lingus for 18 years. Then I worked with Ryanair for about 5 years. But I was shy of 40, and I just knew that it was time for me to try and do something on my own. It became harder to work, in a restrictive environment without be fully able to express myself. So I just knew that going out on my own was the right direction, even though it meant I'd be traveling, I'd be away a bit more, a bit of a home bird, never moved, out of Ireland really. But I still knew that was the right thing for me from a career and a personal point of view. And I think you'd say anybody who has done that will always say that they never regretted it. So take the risks, but measure the risks. Just know what you're heading for. Don't take unquantified risks, but do take them even with your career.
you clearly trusted your instincts at these particular times, where you had to make a decision, which is obviously, served you very well. Just a final piece, we might finish. We started obviously on the employer branding piece, and maybe sort of finish on that piece. I mean, there's a lot at the moment now, obviously. Since sort of COVID is hopefully sort of a thing of the past, or certainly the form it was. So some companies have a preference to get people into the office 5 days a week. Other companies are maybe taking a more relaxed view. We hear so many different things. What's been your take on it so far, or is there something you find has worked particularly well from Emerald, or does it depend on the function within the business?
It's very much function dependent, that's for sure. Our engineers have no choice but to work on the aircraft. Our pilots and cabin crew have no choice but to actually fly the aircraft and serve the customer. So that's where it starts. And most of our business is about supporting everything that supports the customer. So if you take it right down to that level, our job is to support the pilots and the cabin crew in their day-to-day work, and everything we do is around that. There are some functions that can be worked remotely. So where those functions can be worked remotely, we would take a more flexible view, and typically we'd allow for some time, in the week where the person can work from home, assuming that they're able to, justify that, and they are saying, look, I'm going to work from home tomorrow. I'm going to get the budget done. And, if I get a day at this at home, I'll get it done much quicker. And in fact,
sense,
and people set themselves a target and say, look, I'll do that. And we have some functions where people can comfortably work 1-2 days a week from home. But even in functions which could be almost totally remote, we would not be in favor of allowing 100% remote working. And the reason for that is that we're all part of a team here, and you don't build a culture with everybody sitting in their living room, with the laptop. You build a culture where people are working together. And of course, somebody who can work remotely is great, but if that person with all that skill and experience was to leave you, how are you going to have somebody step into the role? So there needs to be the collaborative work. There needs to be the communication that will happen almost informally. Even body language, even getting together around a table to discuss things. The discussion may take an unusual direction, but it will never have taken that direction if you're all just sat on Teams. So we use Teams quite a lot. We use a lot of remote working tools. I've recently been able to get myself disciplined about sending emails outside of work hours. So I've found that little button in Outlook that enables me to schedule emails. So, it might suit me to write an email on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday night, but I'll schedule it not to arrive until 8 o'clock on a Monday, which, enables people to have, literally free time, because that's one of the downsides of the remote working culture is that, some people automatically or, intuitively expect you to be always on. And that's not a great place to be either, because we need people to be well rested. Even if they're not flying the aircraft, we want all our people to have a bit of disconnect and time to themselves, so that way they can enjoy their work. If the work is haunting them, it becomes unenjoyable after a while.
Yeah, and I think you've explained that really well, because it's not a black and white discussion. There are individuals that come and they say they're seeking X and Y, and they're entitled to pursue whatever sort of suits them. But to me, it has to work for both parties. And exactly like you say, when your work is part of a management team, as part of a group, a lot of the quality meeting, or they can be in person, and then maybe someone over a period of time builds up a good level of confidence and trust. As you say, if they can save a couple of hours commute and get stuck into, sort of detailed work, then that can work well. So I just to finish up, Conor, I'd like to say thanks very much. Congratulations on your success at Emerald so far. It's been a really exciting journey. All of the pieces we discussed, I would say keep up the good work. Certainly from an employee, or when we're introducing Emerald to potential employees, and I'm sure when people are looking for roles, it really stands out when there is that presence on the likes of LinkedIn, that they don't have to look very far to see a very active, founder who's proactive about, the culture by design piece, which you've discussed. So thanks very much for your time, and best wishes for 2023.